Mike Flanagan is planning on making changes to Stephen King's story in his adaptation of The Dark Tower, and he's the only person I trust to do so. Mike Flanagan's Dark Tower adaptation has been in development since 2022, though the writer, director, producer has been busy on various projects, including the upcoming Stephen King adaptation, The Life of Chuck. He's also developing titles like Clayface for DC, a new adaptation of Carrie, and a fresh take on The Exorcist. Mike Flanagan's best shows include titles like Midnight Mass, The Haunting series, and The Fall of the House of Usher. He's become synonymous with his work in horror, and he's already adapted multiple Stephen King books. Recently, Mike Flanagan discussed how he would need to make changes to The Dark Tower due to the rights to various Stephen King characters, such as Father Callahan, being held by different companies. However, this issue highlights a broader challenge in adapting this show. Mike Flanagan can change The Dark Tower without damaging its identity. Mike Flanagan understands Stephen King's material and viewer base. The Dark Tower is a massive story that's been praised for weaving in various Stephen King characters, from its Pennywise to the Stan's Randall Flagg to Salem's Lot's Kurt Barlow. It's the intersection between King's stories, and in a sense, one of the most important for an adaptation to get right. In the interview, Mike Flanagan points out that some of those characters won't be available. For example, Warner Brothers owns the rights to it and Salem's Lot, so characters from those books would be off limits. If anyone else were to talk about changing The Dark Tower in any way, I'd be concerned. Mike Flanagan's plan seems solid, though, as he evidently knows enough about Stephen King's books to understand what audiences will be looking for. He uses Insomnia as an example, stating that the average audience member might not catch a reference to the book anyway. Therefore, he can alter the story, offering Stephen King fans a character from a different book that Amazon would have the rights to use. Mike Flanagan has proven to be a Stephen King adaptation expert. The Life of Chuck is Mike Flanagan's recent success. Tom Hiddleston as Chuck dancing with Annalise Basso as Janice in The Life of Chuck. If there's anyone who could successfully weave Stephen King stories interchangeably, aside from King himself, it's Mike Flanagan. Flanagan is currently working on his fourth adaptation of a Stephen King novel, outside of The Dark Tower, and has established himself as a faithful adapter of the legendary author's work. He's delivered some of the most popular horror TV shows of the decade, and while The Dark Tower will undoubtedly be his most daunting task yet, he's the only screenwriter who could do it justice. Why The Dark Tower is so hard to adapt straightforward. The Dark Tower was always going to require some changes. Roland Deschain, Idris Elba, and Jake Chambers, Tom Taylor, walking through the streets in The Dark Tower, 2017. The Dark Tower is a tricky series to adapt, regardless of the additional Stephen King characters. As Mike Flanagan says, the story begins with a simple concept: one man in pursuit of another. The gunslinger traverses a desert with the intent of catching up with the man in black. There's no immediate exposition to explain his motivation or to explain what type of world this story is set in. All of that is added later on. Audiences will be confused at the start, but their curiosity will hopefully be enough to keep them going. It would be easy for a studio to take this story and dilute it, revealing how the world works immediately, cushioning audiences with exposition. However, like Westworld, Lost, or Severance, this story works best with audiences dropped right into it, forced to reckon with numerous mysteries. Mike Flanagan knows how to care for Stephen King's material, and it's clear he's thinking through the series as a long-term project, planning ahead for potential obstacles. The Dark Tower is one of the most challenging fantasy series to potentially adapt, but it appears to be in safe hands.